Bears, in some people's minds, the best sports day of the year, baby.
Da, 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 do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Boo, 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 boo.
Yes, I was listening to the Eye on College Basketball podcast yesterday. I got my bracket filled out. If you're watching live or listening to this before like 12:15, you still have time to join our bracket challenge, and I'm very excited for it. I did, just like Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander on the Eye on College Basketball podcast, I did pick against the Florida Gators in the first round. Sorry, Jamie.
At least we're there.
Yeah, that's a great point. Filled out a bracket with my son for the first time today. That was a fun father-son bonding moment, except he picked South Carolina to win the championship for some reason because he likes red.
I know why.
Not going to go well. Not going to go well.
What's their mascot again?
Oh, he doesn't know that. He doesn't know that. Anyway, we have a guest here, Joe Pisapia of Fantasy Pros at Joe Pisapia 17 at Joe Pisapia 17 on X, on Twitter. Don't say X, on Twitter. Joe, what's up? Welcome to the show.
I agree. I hate saying X too. I've become accustomed to it, which makes it feel gross. And by the way, Dave, I recorded your amazing rendition. I've made it my new ringtone now for my phone because that was truly spectacular in the opening.
My condolences to everybody's ears who's around your phone.
Last time we had a guest on, it was Ben Gretsch, and at the very end of the show, Jamie he reprimanded me. He's like, Tell him where we can find him, because I forgot to do that for the first hour of the show. So I'm going to do that now at Joe Pisapia 17. Not just tell us where we can find him, but you're a baseball guy too. Tell us about all your content.
Well, I'm here, so you can find me here right now. I'm hanging out with you guys. Look, you can find me everywhere. I'm always on Fantasy Pros. We got Fantasy Pros MLB in high gear right now. We're doing our daily baseball show starting on Thursday, Monday through Friday. The Welsh and myself doing leading off, which is great. It's the only live baseball show every single Monday through Friday, which is tremendous. We got all the NFL draft coverage. We'll be doing it live again, but we got mock drafts coming up. We got Trevor Sikkema joining us this week from PFF for the draft show. We're doing just great stuff. And of course, Betting Pros channel too. We got a ton of content there for baseball, for basketball, and Sports Grid TV every Sunday morning. You can see my face for 2 hours, Sundays at 9 to 11 Eastern time. Talking football, talking baseball, talking everything. So, that's enough places. Oh, yeah, and the Black Book. Yeah, for baseball and football every year. I think that's done. I'm exhausted. I need a
nap. I do think that our Fantasy Baseball Today show is also live Monday through Friday. So
it's the only one with me live, though. I think that's
a good point. Also, Fantasy Baseball Today might be Sunday night. So technically, I don't know, but that's probably Monday night. But anyway, yes.
There's a lot of pressure for Adam. He's never been on a show with a better host than him.
Oh man,
I think Jamie indirectly said that I'm a better host than him.
I don't host the podcast. You do.
You host a show. All right. Anyway, Jamie, the Brown. So what we're going to do today with Joe is we're going to get his thoughts on free agency. I think it's good to have an outsider perspective here because he liked Derrick Henry going in the second round, for example. We didn't like that one so much. So in a full PPR draft, I don't know if you were aware of that, Joe. I sent you the draft. I don't think I told you it was full PPR, but I don't know if that changed anything.
I assumed.
Okay.
And PPR.
We'll talk about the Eagles passing game. How about this for AJ Brown? Air yards, 30-plus air yards. Let me find this stat real quick because in the second half of the season, he wasn't so good. First 9 games, he had 4 catches for 173 yards and a touchdown on 9 targets on throws of 30 or more air yards. In his last 7 games, he had 2 targets compared to 9 in his first 9 games. He did not have a single catch on a deep ball from Jalen Hurts in that stretch. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Joe's top 5 wide receivers, one breakout for 2024, and who is in all of our Final Fours. Jamie, the Browns signed D'Onta Foreman. You didn't like my Nick Chubb pick yesterday, 2 days ago in the 6th round. Does this make any difference? Do you like it even less now?
I'm trying to think. Has everywhere he's gone the last 3 stops, there's been an injury to somebody there?
Or a trade, right?
You had Derrick Henry's injury was when D'Onta Foreman was on Titans. Then where did he go? Oh, no, started Carolina with Christian McCaffrey. Then Derrick Henry got hurt. Then Khalil Herbert got hurt. Then here we go.
No, your timeline's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was Tennessee in 2021.
Okay.
Then Carolina in 22. That's when McCaffrey got traded.
Okay, right.
Yeah. And then he had a 5-game stretch without Khalil Herbert last year. He had double-digit. He had like 15 or more carries in 4 of those 5 games. He had a 33 fantasy point game with a receiving touchdown. Foreman set a career high with 11 catches last year in 9 games. But does this move the needle in any way for anyone? Jerome Ford or Nick Chubb, anything?
No, I think it's just depth, but it's probably an indication that they're preparing for Nick Chubb to not be ready for the start of the season, just in case he is not. So, yeah, I'm like I said, I'm probably out on Chubb for the most part.
Well, what was that report that I sent you, Adam? That Chubb had ACL surgery in November, even though he suffered the injury in September. They had to do MCL surgery first, and then they had to get to the ACL in November. So I would imagine that pushed back his timeline to be good to go by 2 months, which will put him very close to the start of training camp of being potentially ready to go. I kind of like this for Foreman. Like, I've moved him into a rankable spot, whereas before no one would even think about him. But if you're going 0 RB, there's a chance this dude might be the lead back for Cleveland by the time the season starts. He's an RB for hire. Every time anybody has a spot open, they go to D'Onta Foreman, and hasn't been horrible for fantasy.
Do you think he'll play ahead of Ford?
I think he'll mix in with Ford.
Okay.
I think those are your 2 running backs until Chubb is good to go.
So how about you, Mr. Pisapia? I took Nick Chubb early in the 6th round. Where would you have taken him?
I think I probably would pass. As much as I love Nick Chubb and I've been a very big supporter of his for many years, it's just really hard to imagine, especially with the signing today too. I kind of agree to Jamie's point, although his whole teaser for like what seems like an ID Network special about wherever this guy goes, why is it that whoever in front of him somehow befalls a terrible tragedy? Coming up next, where will Foreman go tomorrow, and what running back will he kill in order to start? I mean, it was ominous. But I do agree with Dave's point also that it does feel like they are preparing for depth early, which is an indicator to me also that maybe we pump the brakes here on our expectations of Chubb. I do think Nick Chubb will come back. What that looks like, I don't know, but there's enough injuries in the NFL to, choke a horse that you really want to start your team with all these question marks in terms of running back already and are you going to invest a 6th-round pick? I think 6 a little too much for me. We're talking 8, 9. Okay, now I'm kind of listening there because then Chubb becomes a real upside play for the second half perhaps. But I mean, they're out there signing Foreman. They've got Ford. I do think it's going to be a mix, which is going to be terrible for everybody.
All right, so let's get to Joe's takeaways from the draft and from free agency in general. So you said that Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley were great values in round 2. Barkley went right in the middle. They basically went in the same stretch. Henry just a little bit after Barkley. Dave and Jamie, would you have taken Henry in round 2 in PPR?
No.
Round 3?
Toward the end of round 3, yeah.
Okay, so it's a big difference there. So, Joe, why are you comfortable with Derrick Henry in round 2 in a PPR league?
I'm comfortable because, again, I don't mind the hero RB strategy. And there's one guy that I know is going to get all the carries in Baltimore. He's going to get a lot of touchdown looks. It's an offense that is built to run the football. It always has been. I think this is the best case scenario. When we, back in end of January, we were predicting where the guys would go. And this is the one I kept saying, I want Derrick Henry to go to the Baltimore Ravens. This is where I want him to go. It's going to be a great situation for him. They're going to run the football. They need to run the football. They're built to run the football. And even a PPR league, again, if he gets that volume, if he gets those, the touchdown equity that he's gotten in the past, I mean, he has upgraded the offense significantly here. I mean, he has not played with a Lamar Jackson level quarterback in his career. So, I mean, let's look at some of the quarterbacks this guy's played with. So there's every opportunity, despite the fact that he's 30, and I understand the red flags of that, but Derrick Henry's physically built different than any other running back that we've seen. So I'm going to put that to aside. This is redraft. We're not talking dynasty here. So in redraft leagues, I think he's a really good value where if I'm at the end of the 2nd round, I don't mind going, early in there saying, let me lock in Henry. And then there's some other good wide receivers that I feel pretty solid about, especially some of the values we saw later on in this draft too, in the 4th round, even 5th round, where there's some guys out there you could really make a case for that would be pretty strong wide receiver 2 upside guys. So I'm okay with Henry there. And in terms of Barkley, that's another one too, where Barkley to me, without Kelsey there under center, it makes me just possibly think that maybe the Philadelphia brotherly shove thing isn't quite as much of a thing as we usually get. Maybe it's possible that we do see a Saquon Barkley that gets more, red zone targets and even potentially a lot of goal line carries too. Maybe we start to take a little bit of a pressure off that situation there and expand the offense's horizons. And I think that's a really unique situation. And with both of these running backs, I still think there's something left in the tank for both of them. And now they're both going to elevated offenses where we're so used to them playing in terrible offensive systems. Now they're going to really good ones, and they're not quite over the hill yet. And the rest of the running backs, we can make a ton of cases here and there about, it's just a guy in a new place, but they don't change their stripes. Those two in particular are in really good positions where the offensive upgrade is so much, and there's still, I think, something left in the tank where it becomes really intriguing to me to invest in them. And then, hammer wide receiver, round 1, round 3, and so on and so forth.
Dave, response there. Why are you? I know you're good with Barkley. He went with the 5th pick of round 2, but you're not good with Henry with the 4th to last pick. So what would that be? The 9th pick of round 2. Probably should have just said 9th right out of the gate there. Yeah, your thoughts?
I agree with a lot of what Joe's saying. And I think everybody could envision Derrick Henry getting 15 to 20 total touchdowns and well over 1,200 rushing yards. And Baltimore should be in a bunch of games where they should have a lead and Henry will get fed. I do worry a little bit about him getting overfed. He is 30. They've got to know that. So maybe there will be a lot of games, particularly early in the season, where he does share running back snaps with somebody else. And then there's the other thing, and this is really my beef with drafting Henry. It's not the age. It's drafting him too close to his ceiling. And his ceiling is, top 5 fantasy running back. I don't think that a top 5 fantasy running back is getting drafted in round 2, but I still feel like round 2, it's too close to the ceiling. I want to have a little bit more wiggle room there. And I think that there will be people in every draft that ignore that. They want to get Derrick Henry. They see the upside in him, and they're going to draft him really close to it. And I just don't want to do that. I'd rather take a chance on another running back who might not get to 18 fantasy points per game, but also isn't 30 years old, isn't going to catch 15 passes or 20 passes over the balance of the season, isn't going to play with a quarterback that'll take some carries away from him. It's minor stuff. I'm kind of overlooking the age thing, which is dangerous, but I do think that he is built differently, like Joe said. I've called him a cyborg, Joe. I think he's
I like that.
cyborg of the
Dave,
year.
I got a question for you. I don't know how much stock you put in this, but do you put any stock into the concept of, every now and then we get these guys who are elite level talents that when the team that drafted them moves on for them, they have this weird renewed sense of, well, I got to prove it again. Do you put anything to that when you're talking about these elite level guys like Barkley or like Henry? Because I'm putting just a tad of that into this pot as well.
I'm very interested in the answer to this question, Dave, but we're going to leave it like a little cliffhanger there. We got to take a quick commercial break. I apologize. Should have done that a few minutes ago. But that was a great way. That was a great, what a host. That's a great host question from Joe. Ask that question. Now we'll go to break and we'll get the answer from Dave. Do Barkley and Henry have a chip on the shoulder, something to prove? Find out after this.
Bracket season is here. Join the madness by playing the official bracket game of the NCAA. Get the CBS Sports app and be part of the madness.
All right. Before we went to break, perfect host Joe Pisapia asked Dave about this. What was it? What did you say exactly?
Well, first of all, you did the tease, which is really the host thing. I just asked the question because I think sometimes, when you get these elite level guys in the NFL and they all of a sudden end up on a new team for the first time, we've seen it with a lot of the quarterbacks over the years, certainly the Mannings and the Bradys and all these guys, but to a certain extent, sometimes the wide receivers too, where sometimes some of these guys, they end up in that new spot and they have this renewed sense of, hey, I got a chip on my shoulder. I got to prove myself. People think I'm done in this league. This team didn't want me anymore. Oh yeah, let me stick it to you. And I don't think that's true for everybody, but sometimes when you got a guy like Derrick Henry or you got a guy like Saquon Barkley, they're in a different level. I just curious. I'm not putting too much into that pot, but I'm putting a little sprinkle in there. I just know if any of the guys were as well.
Jamie's going to
apply it to Raheem Mostert, who did something similar, not his first year in Miami, but at 30 years old, changed teams. And at 31, tied the NFL lead in total touchdowns, led the NFL in rushing touchdowns. Now, obviously, no one's going to compare their careers and say it's similar, but, he did make reference to that. I spoke to him at the Pro Bowl. Joe always likes when I make my I spoke to this guy references.
Oh, that's my favorite.
Name dropping.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with with thinking that, and he is an alien, so there is a lot to love about what he can be. But it's just a matter of, will everything sort of align for him to do that? And I think Dave hit it on the head. It's like you're drafting him too close to what his ceiling could be, and not necessarily also factoring in some of the pitfalls with him at his age, because that's really the thing that scares me the most, is just these guys, when they get to this point in their career, they just fall off a cliff. And so, is everything going to hold up for the Ravens too? I mean, it makes me nervous. That's all, because
There's guys like
doesn't get
Curtis
rescued by
Martin,
his pass catching game.
Well, Curtis Martin, LaDainian Tomlinson, Jerome Bettis, Eric Dickerson. I'm just looking at the all-time rushing leaders, Marshall Faulk. All of those guys had that second win play, even Edgerrin James to a certain extent too. Marcus Allen. It's funny. I'm looking at the top 15 guys of all time rushing, and all of those, elite level all-time great running backs, all did end up somewhere else. All did kind of, do exactly what I'm talking about. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to end up there. That's the thing. Varying age. Bettis, I think, was a little older if memory serves. I think you could put him in that bucket. I'm trying to remember.
Curtis Martin definitely had a good late kick.
Marcus Allen played until he was 37 years old.
Yeah.
But he wasn't really that good at that point. I mean, at age 30, he averaged 3.8 yards per carry, but that was kind of like normal for him. He had some, no, he wasn't really so good in his 30s. Later in his career, actually, like how about at age 36, he rushed for 830 yards and 9 touchdowns.
Well, don't forget, Adam, some of those stats that might not look good some years with the Raiders, that's also when they had a fascination when they were constantly trying to replace him. It was this guy, it was that guy, Bo Jackson for a short period of time. Al Davis was constantly trying to replace Marcus Allen for some reason. So you can't always take some of those Raider stats with a grain of salt.
And some of those running backs went on to teams that didn't win. And so the one thing that kind of stood out to me, Joe, with what you said is Saquon Barkley didn't really win a lot in New York. Derrick Henry was on some good teams in Tennessee, didn't get to the Super Bowl in Tennessee. Jamie, speaking of name dropping, Pete Prisco has a line that he's told us about the order of what players kind of prioritize in their careers. Is it money, legacy, ring, or money, ring, legacy?
It's money, legacy, ring.
That's what I thought. I couldn't remember the last two. But we know that Saquon and Derrick Henry, they've each made a boatload of money. And now I think they want to just prove that they can still play at the high level.
I don't think Barkley's made
on a winning team. I think they're looking at the last two parts of that rank and file that Pete talks about when it comes to NFL players.
Barkley's got the Campbell soup money, Jamie. Don't forget. And so I think my question about both these guys is the same. They're getting upgrades in situation, right? I mean, we agree on that real quick, right?
Totally.
It is the only thing holding Barkley and Henry back potentially. Barkley and Henry, because Henry's 30, 4.2 yards per carry last year, tied for a career low. He's got 2,030 carries in his career. Barkley, I don't know how to judge him. He's been a very average, if not below average running back recently. In his rookie season in 2018, Saquon Barkley had 7 carries that went for 40 or more yards. Since his rookie season, he has 6 in the last 5 seasons. So he had more of those in 1 year. He just has not been the same running back. I feel like people are still kind of hanging on to Saquon Barkley as a rookie. He hasn't been anything like that. But I just wonder if not just the injuries, but the Giants' pathetic offense and perennially bad offensive line are the reasons for that. He's getting such an upgrade there. So, I mean, I almost feel like the only thing that can hold those guys back is that they are just not that good anymore. They are kind of a shell of themselves.
They're getting upgraded offensive lines though, both of them as well.
I don't know
that's a big part.
Ravens, though. I mean, the Ravens are losing 3 linemen?
Yeah, but I mean, I think I have a lot of faith in Harbaugh to make those replacements and those moves. You know what I mean? Like historically speaking, they've been able to turn that line over the last decade. So I don't know. I mean, the Saquon Barkley stuff is all true, and the injuries didn't help. But my God, the offensive line, the quarterback play. I mean, it's been a disaster since he got there, basically. And I try not to make excuses for Barkley because I think he has underwhelmed. I think that's fair considering the hype he had in college. Outside of his rookie season, it's been kind of a slog. So this is sort of that renewed life. And again, I think when you're looking to win a fantasy league, I think that's the kind of pick where if Barkley does end up fulfilling the prophecy finally in Philadelphia, man, as a second round pick, that's huge because you could possibly lock in like Justin Jefferson, with the 4th overall pick and then come back around and take Barkley. And those are 2 guys who might finish top 5 in their respective positions, and then in the third round go ahead and take somebody else that could really, be a banger for you. Like, that's a hell of a way to start a draft, I think. And then continue to pound wide receiver, tight end, all that stuff, and then take shots at RB later on. It's a really nice way when you're looking at the player pool of 24, how it's shaking up, especially because it's not a good year for rookie running backs. It's not a rookie running back year. We're going to get super excited about these guys are going to elevate up the charts. I don't feel that's going to happen this year. So we have to have a different sensibility when it comes to these guys and what the pool looks like.
All right, let's go to our next topic here. Joe looked at the draft and said that Joe Mixon should be going ahead of DeAndre Swift. We'll get that spreadsheet back up here and take a look at where they went. Joe Mixon went in the 5th round, and Swift went just a few picks earlier. He was the running back that went just before him. So it was Swift with the 4th pick of round 5, and then Jalen Hurts, DK Metcalf, Cooper Kupp, and Joe Mixon. You feel strongly about that, Joe, that Mixon should be going ahead of DeAndre Swift? And is that just a Joe thing? I mean, do you also think that Joe Burrow should be going ahead of like Lamar Jackson, or there's just no bias?
I don't think Joe Burrow should be going ahead of Lamar Jackson in fantasy because of the rushing equity. I think if you're talking about quarterback play, of course. But in fantasy, that's a different situation. But the Mixon one, and this is weird because I've never been a Mixon guy necessarily, but even the expert consensus ranking on Fantasy Pros has Mixon at 18 and DeAndre Swift at 26 so far at the early one. And I think there's a bigger gap between those two guys. You're going to have a rookie quarterback in Chicago. That's pretty much a lock now. I think we all know that. With Mixon, he goes into a ready-made offense that really just kind of needs a running back. And you saw when that offensive line did get healthy in the second half, all of a sudden Devin Singletary looked pretty good. So you've got an offense where CJ Stroud can push the football downfield. If Tank Dell comes back healthy, they brought back Schultz. Nico Collins was a revelation in the second half. This is a really good situation where Mixon doesn't have to be great. He just has to be good. And good is good enough here for, I think, an easy pick for me over Swift.
Jamie, I think you agree there.
Oh, totally. Yeah. You have to forgive this pick, though, Joe. It was made by Dan Schneier, taking DeAndre Swift over Joe Mixon.
Well, I like Dan, so I don't want to throw shade at
Dan. We like Dan too, but sometimes he goes a little, awry, and made a mistake here. He also took Derrick Henry, so I don't know if you still want to sign off.
Well, it's a love-hate relationship then. That's
So Dan made a couple of squirrely picks. But yes, Joe Mixon should go ahead of DeAndre Swift. I do wonder though, if the Bears move on from one of their backs, most likely Khalil Herbert, that if that changes the opinion of Swift because of the upside of the offense. It won't for me, but I just wonder if that will change his outlook in ADP and consensus rankings and all those things, just because one less potential mouth to feed. Because right now it does feel like it could be a little crowded if Herbert still has a role, if Roschon has maybe the role in the passing game. But if they move on from one of those guys and it's all of a sudden, hey, Caleb Williams looks great. They made all these upgrades across the board, the receiving core, tight end, everything. And we get a little bit more excited about DeAndre Swift. So I think the gap's a little bit closer if that happens between Swift and Mixon. But they're about 8 spots apart for me as well, just based on how things look right now.
I want to ask you, Joe, about Zack Moss. Right? Zack Moss went in round 6 of this draft. Joe Mixon went in round 5. No, Zack Moss went in round 7, right? Yeah, round 7. And Joe Mixon went in round 5. And I don't really think Mixon's going to a better situation, right? Moss is going to the Bengals. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Joe Burrow throws to his running backs. In year 1, CJ Stroud really did not. I don't know if that was a personnel issue or what. But also just the idea that Zack Moss might just be better than Joe Mixon. In fact, that's what I think Ben Baby on ESPN basically was saying, that this might be a win-win. He might just be better. The advanced metrics were also kind of monster. I'm just reading the article and I read it last week. I'm also reading something on The Athletic from better position now is running back. More snaps for Chase Brown and the explosiveness fit of Zack Moss are better complements to Burrow in this scheme than Mixon. So maybe it is the Chase Brown being a factor there and Dameon Pierce not in Houston, but should there really be a 2-round difference between Joe Mixon and Zack Moss?
Yes, I think so. Because I don't think the Texas situation is one that of committee. I think Mixon is the guy there. And I think that's a lock. Whereas Moss does have Chase Brown. It's funny, whenever you see this, I'm sure the guys will probably attest to this also. Whenever you see the guys that are ranked right next to each other, like right now it's Moss at 37, Chase Brown at 38. That's when everybody sort of consensus throws their hands up and go, I don't know. To me, that is always the I don't know. I always circle that and go, yeah, if you guys don't know and we're all the experts and the analysts, then how is anybody else supposed to know? And the Moss thing too, I don't want to discount how much of a genius I think Shane Steichen is, because when you remove that genius from Philadelphia, the Eagles suffered. That offense suffered. You saw in some small doses when, he had the healthy pieces, when he had Anthony Richardson, and even to a certain extent, my goodness, to get where he got with Gardner Minshew this past season. I think Shane Steichen is going to be one of those, big time coaches in the NFL. I think he is fantastic. I haven't had the chance to talk to him the way Jamie has or some of the other guys, but I will say
this weekend, I get to talk to him this weekend.
Well, when he talked to him, tell him I said he's a genius.
I will.
And tell him I said hello. And then also tell him that I'm really excited about Richardson, Pittman, this entire offense. But, Moss, I can't shake those years where he was just a nothing in Buffalo. And opportunities were there for him to seize it. He just never did. Why? I guess we can speculate as to a myriad of reasons. But at the end of the day, I think to chase what happened last year in a small sample size with an offense that desperately needed him is foolish, because I just don't know if it's fantasy worthy. If you're talking about a flex guy, bench guy, okay, at the 36 running back position overall, there's absolutely worse things you could do than Zack Moss for sure. But at the same time, it's not something I'm chasing necessarily either.
Okay. Here's one that's, I think, a fairly spicy take. Half of it is anyway. Drake London is the biggest offseason winner. This is according to Joe. Drake London is the biggest offseason winner so far, and round 4 is far too cheap, and that's where he went. He went right in the middle of round 4. That's not so spicy. This part is he'll be a second rounder by August and still worth it. Ooh, you know what, Dave? I'm gonna let you react to that first, and then we'll go to Joe. Drake London, great value in round 4, and he should be he will be a second rounder, and it will be worth it there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he makes it to late round 2. Let's call it that as a pick this coming draft season. But I do think that he is an absolute winner because he's getting Kirk Cousins. He's upgrading from Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke. I did some digging on just wide receivers and how they do when they get at least 7 targets. Last season, the average percent of the time when a wide receiver had at least 7 targets and scored 15 or more PPR points was 52%. With Kirk Cousins, it was 71%, meaning 71% of the time that one of his wide receivers had 7 targets, they went over 15 PPR points. London had 6.9 targets per game last year. So I think it's pretty safe to say that he'll be in that 7 target range as a floor this year. I completely get it. What worries me about London is the touchdown production. Can he get to 8, 9, 10 touchdowns? Can he actually come through with more than that? I think the catches will have to really be there. I see him as a PPR proposition. Will he be good enough to be a second rounder? Again, I think you're drafting him too close to a ceiling. If you do that, I'm much more comfortable taking him in round 3.
So just something with me and Joe last year at the flex draft. Joe was doing the stickers when my draft was going on. His draft was afterwards. And we were almost like in sync with he almost knew everything I was going to do. And this is so funny because last night I adjusted my rankings following the draft, and Drake London right now is 25 for me. So he's just outside the top 24. And I totally agree. I see the rocket ships just, completely in the direction for Drake London. Very excited about the situation for him. So he may be a second round pick for me by the time we're done.
That's why I'm so glad that Jamie was in that first draft, because I hate drafting with Jamie because we have the exact same board and the same rankings. But I'm just looking, Dave made a great point there, had a great stat about Kirk Cousins. He also played with Marcus Mariota. Okay. Let's not forget that. Drake London has never played with a barely serviceable quarterback in the NFL yet. He is a terrific young prospect. And I keep using the word prospect because we haven't seen the best of Drake London yet. I think he's going to get a huge amount of that target volume. I do think 8 touchdowns, as Dave was alluding, that's what he's got to get to, is right there. I've got him currently as my 10th wide receiver on the board, and I'll tell you why, because the guys right around there, Debo. Wow. Well, here you go. Debo has a situation too where he's always, we're always worried about him, the injuries, and that quotient's always very high. If you want to take Debo over him, that's fine. DJ Moore is now, I have him at 11. He's going to be playing with a rookie quarterback this year. We just don't know. Pittman Jr., I love. Pittman's going to be playing with Anthony Richardson, still kind of a rookie quarterback. Ayuk, we know the Ayuk, dynamic with Deebo Samuel. So all these guys that are going around that cluster, the one guy that sticks out that could be the absolute alpha, that has a veteran quarterback, that is a team ready to win, that is all set, it just needed the quarterback, it's Drake London. And I think that's an easy thing for me. I mean, Mike Evans is another year older, so is Devontae Adams. I'm looking at the rest of this board, and although I might be drafting him at his ceiling, I'm also drafting him with the present construct of the player pool at wide receiver. in essence, basically showing me that Drake London is the best investment of these guys, because even though I haven't seen it yet, there's a better chance that I'm going to see it this year than I will with all these other guys I could start to throw some shade at here and there. And I think that it's one of those things, the more we talk about it, the more we think about it. We're going to keep talking about it, and people are going to start listening, and he's going to start flying up draft boards because people like Jamie are going to say it, and they're right. And at the end of when all is said and done, I do believe that London's going to be much closer to a second-round pick. Maybe he doesn't go there, but if he goes in the third, I'm going to take him every single time he's there because I think he can be that good. I think the Falcons are going to win this division.
Joe, who do you have at 9 at wide receiver? The guy ahead
at 9, I have Garrett Wilson currently at 9. I have Nico Collins at 8. So
okay.
That was it. No, you know what, Joe? This is very interesting because yesterday we were talking about, you see this draft board here. I took Chris Olave with the 3rd pick of round 2, and I just didn't like it. And I said after the top 8 receivers, which didn't include Nico Collins for me, it did include Garrett Wilson. Yeah, I would have him probably 7, and then AJ Brown 8 in PPR. After that, I was like, I don't think there may not be a single wide receiver that I think belongs in the second round. You're making the case that Drake London is that guy. So putting him there, it does. I mean, I think it's fine. I didn't really consider it yet.
Well, how much of a lock is Garrett Wilson to be a success this year? I'm just saying, is Aaron Rodgers not a volatile 40-year-old human being at this point for a whole host of reasons? I'm just saying, like, it's not like a lock. Like Aaron Rodgers comes back and everything is hunky-dory and just great with the Jets. Ask any Jet fan if anything is great with the Jets, and they're going to tell you the answer is undoubtedly no, never.
I guess if you want to compare the two, the one thing would be is that Drake London did not ascend to the heights that Garrett Wilson did in his rookie season with also crappy quarterback play. So
agreed. Drake London's going to be dripping in Cole's cash with Kirk Cousins all season long, Jamie. All season.
It's a great comparison. I mean, you're talking about 2 third-year wide receivers that have the chance to have that breakout campaign that we love to see in this type of scenario, that things just improve. We thought it was going to happen for Wilson last year because of Aaron Rodgers joining the Jets. But yes, these are 2 guys, like, you want to get in on players like this before it happens, as opposed to, oh, I wish I took them after the fact. This is the situation where you want to buy into these guys, which is why, like I said, I was excited about Drake London getting Kirk Cousins, not initially to this point, but yeah, he's inside my top 12, and like I said, just outside round 2, and I would have no problem putting him in round 2 right now.
Okay. Let's take a commercial break here. And when we come back, I got some more questions for Joe. We'll get his rankings of the top 5 wide receivers, his thoughts on the second half of the season for the Eagles and why it was so bad. One breakout for 2024, Final 4 predictions, emails, and Apple Podcast questions. We still have a lot left here on Fantasy Football Today. We'll be right back.
Last dance, I shall follow your lead. We're on a search for one of the greatest powers ever known. Let's fly.
And welcome back. Joe, big weekend plans? Yeah, this is like your last weekend before baseball starts, so you better go crazy.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm not going to go crazy this weekend, but we are going to WrestleMania nights 1 and 2, my daughters and I, in a couple weeks. So that's my Woodstock. I am so excited for that. You have no idea. It's going to be all kinds of emotions. I'll have no voice on Monday, I'm sure. But yeah, so really, I'm just kind of resting up and gearing up for that. That's really what this weekend is about. Slowly doing it, get a little family dinner on Sunday, do the whole Italian thing. I'll be cooking on Saturday ahead of time, but it's really resting up, gearing up, and getting ready for WrestleMania.
For Mania, yeah. Do you consider yourself a Cody crybaby?
100% Cody crybaby. I love Cody Rhodes so much, and I followed his journey, and I love it. And I love the stuff with his dad. I was always a big Dusty fan when I was a kid too. And it's funny, my dad passed away actually in January, and he actually passed away on the morning of the Royal Rumble. And it was just an emotional night getting to see him go and do his thing there. And I was wearing my Dusty Rhodes shirt, and I was kind of like the 3 hours where he had a little time there where we all kind of like got together, watched the Rumble, and, had a nice smile there. So I'm emotionally invested. I'm crying right now just thinking about it. I will probably shed a tear that night with a tear in my eye, a la Ric Flair, have that moment. And look, 25 years ago, I was an idiot in college at WrestleMania in Philadelphia for The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, which was an incredible thing to experience live. The crowd was split. It was incredible. And now 25 years later, I'm taking my daughters to go see WrestleMania. It's kind of wild. And it makes me feel old, gentlemen. It makes me feel old.
Seasoned.
Seasoned. I like that. That's better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's awesome, man. I mean, that's going to be a fun experience for you. All right. How do you rank the top 5 wide receivers, Joe?
You know, I thought this was going to be an easy question until I really started to dive into it again because I've been in a baseball, mudslide for the last, 4 weeks. I've got Lamb at the top, which I think is probably the easy consensus thing. I just can't quit Jamar Chase. I just want Joe Burrow healthy for a whole season with Jamar Chase. That's all I want for Christmas. If I could just get that, I'd be very excited. I've got Chase 2. It is really hard to not right now put Tyreek Hill 3. I have some concerns about Tua. I have some concerns about at a certain point too, when does the cheetah lose a step? Because if he does, things maybe go in a different direction, but the offense has been so good. They've been so elite. They're so fast paced. Like, I just feel like it can sustain one more year. I have Jefferson at 4, which hurts my soul to have him at 4, but I've got to say, well, what is the quarterback situation? I don't know. We get that definitive in a couple weeks from now. We'll have a better idea what that looks like. Then maybe he could possibly move up, but right now he's holding strong at 4. But maybe the best value at 5 is Amon-Ra St. Brown. And if you're drafting in the middle of, the first round, I don't know how you don't just love getting him at like 7 or 8. I think that's a fantastic way every week to just put a crap ton of points in your lineup. And I think Amon-Ra does not get enough credit still. The fact that he's top 5 in consensus, but for some reason, I don't feel like anybody talks about him as elite. And I think that's just wrong.
I'm surprised Joe's feed didn't cut off there by Thomas putting Jefferson.
Oh yeah, Thomas.
It hurt me. I said it hurt my soul. I mean, I did say I'm the Jefferson wide receiver 1 guy. I bet on him a couple of years ago for AP Player of the Year at 12-1, and it hit that year. Believe me, I love me some Justin Jefferson. He has put money in my pockets. But let's be honest, if it's a JJ McCarthy, whoever it might be, we have to kind of wait and see a little bit, how good that might be able to be. And who knows, maybe I'll change my 2, maybe he jumps to 3 or maybe even 2. We'll find out.
All right. So it was Lamb, Chase, Tyreek, Jefferson, St. Brown.
Correct.
Man, you all have Lamb number 1. It's interesting.
We love Lamb.
What's the Fantasy Pros consensus?
Consensus is Lamb as well. And I mean, how do you not put a guy number 1 in an offense where now they're going to throw the football? He had 181 targets last year. I mean, even if it regresses to 151 or 161, I mean, how do you not get excited about that? 14 touchdowns. Look, is it going to be hard to repeat? Probably, but it's not impossible. And I think a lot of us in the fantasy analyst community have been waiting for this. Like, we keep saying, yeah, this is the Lamb breakout. This is the Lamb breakout. Now we finally got it. And now we're going to piss and moan and get, crappy about it. Like, well, maybe he's not number 1. No, stop self-loathing. We actually got it. It finally happened. Let's enjoy it. Let's put him at number 1 and not overthink it for once.
I don't think he's getting necessarily more targets than Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill was on pace for 182 targets. Lamb had 181. Tyreek Hill missed 1 game. He left 1 game early as well. I didn't factor that in. Just a 17-game pace based on his 16 games. In 2022, he was on pace for 173 targets with a healthy Tua. He's my number 1 right now. I guess it's not really much of a conversation and nothing interesting if all 3 of you just agree. So I'm just going to say that Tyreek Hill is my number 1. I'm not worried about him getting old. He's 30 years old. That's fine. For an elite wide receiver, they usually perform very well at age 30, like Devontae Adams did. So that's not a concern for me. I know that they want more targets. I know that the Dolphins want more players who can make plays. They don't want it to just be the Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle show. Whether that's a tight end or a receiver, I think they're going to invest in that in the draft. But Tyreek Hill is just so damn good. And
so do you have more faith in do you have more faith in the Dolphins coaching staff to get him that, or more faith in Dak Prescott to execute with CeeDee Lamb? I think that's the question. I think you ask yourself of who's
equal faith.
Okay. Because my faith in Tua is not exactly huge. It's not that he wasn't good last year, but I don't know.
Lamb had never done this before, and Tyreek Hill has. True. So Lamb, I think, is really the only one that, and maybe you could say Chase has never really done it.
I mean, you could also say the same thing when Justin Jefferson did it for the first time. I mean, there's going to be a first for everything, and then
Justin Jefferson was, I'm thinking off the top of my head, I'm thinking a lot better than CeeDee Lamb in 2022, right?
Well,
he was
in
better.
2022, Jefferson was the 1. So
Right.
he was the wide receiver one. But I mean, in 2022, CeeDee Lamb, 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns. I'm looking at it right now. Justin Jefferson in 2022, 1,800 yards, 9 touchdowns. So they had the same amount of touchdowns, ironically, but 184 targets for Jefferson. And in Lamb that year, 156.
But Adam, you say it's easy to say because you're saying Lamb is number one. We just had a draft where Tyreek Hill went as the first receiver off the board. If people are comfortable with the Vikings quarterback situation, Jefferson will get right there. Joe said it. If Joe Burrow's healthy and maybe they trade T. Higgins, even without trading T. Higgins, there are going to be some people that might take Jamar Chase first or over one of these other two guys. To me, it's the most fascinating decision that a fantasy manager has to make starting at number 2 overall. Because if you're not going to take Breece Hall or Bijan Robinson, you're going to take one of these receivers, and you want to make sure you're doing the right thing. I don't think that there's a lot of flaws with these guys. You can certainly nitpick them. Tyreek at 30, like Joe said, if he loses a step, quarterback situation for Jefferson, Burrow, et cetera, et cetera. But these 4 guys, and again, not to disrespect Amara St. Brown, I just don't think he's getting drafted ahead of these guys. So for any of these 4, it's such a fascinating decision. But really, I mean, again, extended to what the Drake London conversation. It's the receivers past this group too. When do you take them? How much faith do you have in them? Can Puka do it again? Can AJ Brown overcome last year's second half struggles? Can Garrett Wilson and Drake London ascend to these heights? Who even is in the back end of the top 12 wide receivers? Because Joe gave 5 names of guys that could be in those 2 or 3 spots. So it's a very, very fascinating decision with the top 12 wide receivers this year.
Jamie, do you think that like Amon-Ra would be in salary cap drafts easily always less than those guys?
Yes.
So does that make him a better return on investment when you're trying to fill out an entire lineup?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. What are your thoughts on the Eagles' second half when you look at the way AJ Brown gets drafted? What I anticipate for Jalen Hurts, I still think he's going to be drafted as an elite guy. He wasn't in this draft. He was the 4th quarterback off the board and went like a round later than Allen, Mahomes, and Jackson. But yeah, I think people are going to pay more attention to the year and a half that preceded the second half of 2023, which was just terrible. Joe, what's your take on that?
Look, my take on the Eagles is that schedule wore them out. The pressure wore them out. The OC change wore them out. I think physically Jalen Hurts was worn out at the end of the year. I think this is a team that, carry themselves, by their haunches into the playoffs. And look, at the end, they just didn't have anything left in the tank. And we should not be surprised. I think that's the biggest thing. If you go back, and I did this around the Super Bowl too, because right after the Super Bowl, the 49ers were the favorite to win next year. And I wanted to warn everybody about this because it's the same thing that happened to the Eagles this year. And same thing that happens every single year, almost without fail. Since 2000, so almost 25 years now, only one team has made it back to the Super Bowl after losing. And that team, of course, was a Tom Brady team, the 2018 Patriots, right? And they won back in 2019. The 49ers right now are the current favorite, right? The Eagles last year lost the Super Bowl tough. Things kind of unraveled for them. It's what happens, especially when you lose. If you go back and you look at the teams that lost tough Super Bowls where they were like last play of the game, or in this case, overtime scenarios, things don't go well for those teams. I don't know if it's the wear and tear of the playoffs. I don't know if it's the wear and tear mentally of losing and trying to get back into that space. But I think this was that hangover year for the Eagles. And I think you also realize, as excited as we all were for all those Georgia kids to come through, as talented as they all are, they're all pretty green still on the NFL level. So it takes a little while for some of these young players on defense to really figure it out. Even though they all played together at Georgia, they're not playing together with these guys. I think that this is a good year offseason where I think the Eagles have done a really good job of filling some of the holes they needed. I think Roseman's done a terrific job there this offseason. He always seems to be in the right place, the right time to make the right move. And I think the schedule, I think the wear and tear, everything was in there negative. I'm not concerned with AJ Brown at all. He is my 6th wide receiver. So just, I think that's perfectly comfortable there. Yeah, there was a tail off, but I think the Eagles collectively, we have to kind of put them into one basket and say the whole second half of that year after that incredibly difficult gauntlet schedule where they were running through it pretty well, and then they weren't, and then it just kind of fell apart. Again, I think it's the mental wear and tear of it. And don't be surprised if something similar happens to the 49ers this year. And I'm just kind of running that up the flagpole because, again, since 2000, only one other team has even gotten back, let alone won another Super Bowl the year after losing. It just doesn't happen in the NFL in this modern day era for whatever reason. But I think it's a great thing to study and think about.
So you're comfortable with Brown, wide receiver 6. What about Hurts? Top 3?
It's hard not to put him top 3 still. You can split hairs on these guys. I still like Mahomes just by a hair because, I just think Mahomes is just this otherworldly. He's just a little bit safer. Maybe he doesn't have that rushing equity. Okay, it's fine, but there's something about Mahomes, whereas, there is a range of outcomes, as my friend Derrick Brown likes to say, where maybe Hurts does continue to move towards the other direction. Now, I don't think it's going to happen, but when you have 15 rushing touchdowns and you start to take that back a little bit to 11, okay, it does change the dynamic a little bit. I think the Eagles are going to be good. I think Hurts is a good investment. I would go Allen, Mahomes, Hurts, but again, they're all very close. I'd be happy with any of them.
I'll just go to the next one here. One breakout for 2024. What do you got?
Well, I think it's pretty easy. I think Drake London would be that guy, but the other one too, a quarterback, Anthony Richardson, I think could break fantasy this year if things go right. I told you, I love Steichen, and I've already seen with the early consensus, which is funny because the early ECR is basically us fantasy pros goons, like getting up there and making our ranks. So I know I'm very high on him. Debro is, Erickson is, Fitz is. So like we're all kind of pushing that. I'm really curious to see what happens as other people start putting their ranks up post draft and what that really looks like, because at the earliest rankings, CJ Stroud was going ahead of Richardson. Now that's not necessarily the case. And I think that's a really interesting pivot point to what's going on in super flex formats right now. How good could he be with a healthy offseason, with, putting in the work, which I think he's going to do? It's a special talent, and maybe we're overrating him, and that's possible. And maybe he'll come back to bite us. But in terms of a breakout, I think that whole Colts team, him and Pittman together, could be really special this year. So that would be my big breakout besides Drake London. I think London's just in a perfect spot there this year.
Do you have him over guys like Stroud, Jordan Love?
I have him over right now. I do. And the reason is that rushing equity. And I also want to see what what happens to the draft too. Like the Bengals really need to keep figuring out that offensive line issue. Like they just have to, we have to do a better job here. And I know we thought we did, and it just didn't happen. And, I love Joe Burrow. I think he's a fantastic quarterback. I myself am surprised. I made my rankings and I went over actually to look at them this morning and see what the ECR was currently. And I couldn't believe that Richardson was 6 over Burrow. Like I couldn't believe that was the early consensus, but then I realized it's all my, idiot friends over there. We're all kind of thinking the same way. So I'm curious to see what does the rest of the group think? Because all this ECR stuff, all this ADP, all it is polling, right? That's all it is at the end of the day. It doesn't mean it's right. It's just polling, and polls aren't always correct. We've seen that in the last couple of years, I think in the last decade, but I think we have to understand what the upside is for Richardson, especially in those super flex leagues. And I think it's gonna be really interesting to see over the summer how that quarterback board does change as Burrow gets healthier, as people keep talking about the Texans and what they could do. Texans were an incredibly public team, especially from the money situation and betting side towards the second half. They went from being undervalued to overvalued. So I'm really curious to see if that hangover carries over into fantasy in 2024.
Do you guys have Stroud, or do you have Richardson over Stroud?
No, I have Stroud over Richardson now. I'll probably keep that. The one I'm struggling with is Love over Richardson. I think once he's fully healthy, that'll change for me. Not that I don't expect him to be, but I just want to wait and see, before that happens. Because Love was fantastic to end the season last year too. I think we have, and this is kind of why, you've seen in every draft I've done so far, just waiting on quarterback is the smartest thing to do. I mean, you have such this group of guys that are going to be ranked anywhere from 6 to 12 that all have the ability to be top 5 quarterbacks, in my opinion. So Stroud, Love, 100%. Richardson, Kyler, these guys are all such high ceiling plays that you're getting at such discounts. And again, you see the draft that we did on Tuesday to get Jordan Love as I think it was the 11th quarterback off the board. Don't expect that to happen very often, but that's just playing the board, and as I told you, if it wasn't going to be Love, it would have been Kyler Murray for me, and I would have been thrilled with that.
Okay. Dave, any thoughts?
No, I've got Love at the top of the list just because of how he finished last year and how he was able to put up fantasy points almost regardless of what wide receivers were available in Green Bay. Jaden Reed was on fire. He got hurt, became a wideout that played half the snaps the rest of the way. It's Romeo Doubs stepping up in the playoffs. It's Dontavian Wicks and Bo Melton late into the season. It's Tucker Kraft. Jordan Love found a way to make it work with whoever was out on the field. That's the telltale sign of a good quarterback. And I think that Jordan Love is exactly that. I know Josh Jacobs is there to take away some touchdowns. That stings a little bit, but we saw Love average 25 fantasy points per game in his final 9. It's a small sample size, but I think he could get somewhere between 22 and 25. Getting that dude as the 11th quarterback off the board is insanely good. Definitely worth the idea of waiting on a quarterback, finding one that comes at a value. You can't believe the value that it's at, and then you take them.
And Joe, for you, you guys are going off 4 points for passing touchdowns or 6?
I believe it's going off of 4.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, that's a huge difference.
But you know what? To Jamie's point too, in single quarterback leagues, 100%. Like 100%. Like you wait, you'll get a love. I mean, you'll get Herbert for free. You'll get Kirk Cousins right now going as the 16th quarterback, which I think that's going to change over time too. Tua is out there outside the top 12. So waiting this year, especially, it's a smart thing to do because the 6, as you're alluding to, that 6 through 12 group. I mean, they're going to be super close in terms of relative position value, which is the Black Book system of evaluating players. Like they're going to be right there. So why reach for any of them? But if I was to reach for one, it would be Richardson because there is that possibility where it becomes top 5. Whereas I don't know about the other guys in that 6 through 12. Maybe Love could do it if he can be that consistent, drag that second half over into a full season. That'd be great to see. And maybe he can do it. And that would be fantastic. But at the same time, in the Superflex formats, I think we're in that same thing we were in last year. Not quite as bad as last year, but last year was really brutal. When you're looking in that second grouping, that QB2, it was landmine after landmine, rookie starters here, second-year guys there, inexperience everywhere. And what did it do? It dragged down not just the quarterback play, but then you had the injuries on top of it. Then you had it dragging down all the other wide receivers with them. It was brutal. And I'm not saying it's going to be markedly better this year, but I think it will be a bit better because this quarterback class seems like it's going to be a little bit more helpful in that sense. And some of the bottom pieces, whether it be, the Baker Mayfields of the world. Like Baker Mayfield's 22 right now, but Baker Mayfield was more than serviceable last year as a second quarterback.
And just to, I think, put in perspective, if we're talking 4 points, he's 5th for me too, Richardson.
Yeah, okay.
I'm still going to take Stroud over him in 4 point. You're not, obviously. So who's ahead of him, Jamie? Who are the 4?
The top 4.
Okay.
The 3 Joe mentioned, Allen, Hurts.
I'm still going to take Burrow and Stroud over him.
And I get it. I totally understand.
Yet.
I think that's where Joe's coming from too, where he said he's struggling with Burrow versus Richardson. But
I think in most drafts you'll see Burrow and Stroud go over him, which is why I don't think this early consensus is necessarily going to be what the ADP is. I think after the draft, everybody starts to really dig into it. Everyone get really excited about, but Joe Burrow's healthy. Everything looks good. Like, all that stuff happens. And the more CJ Stroud talk and the publicity is going to be there. I don't know about the publicity around Richardson outside of all of us fantasy nerds. Like, I don't know about what that's going to look like.
Plus, you'll get one of these guys that's going to get a surprise receiver added in the draft. It could be Houston. They've been in on some guys, free agency in the draft and trade. I don't think it'll be Love, but you never know. But there's going to be somebody that gets a surprise rookie, and we're like, oh, okay, that changes things. Indianapolis could do that too. There's some talk about them upgrading over Alec Pierce, so there'll be something that changes it. But I do think in one quarterback leagues, he's the type of guy, Richardson, that there are so many decent number 2 quarterbacks. You mentioned a few of those, but like Matthew Stafford and Trevor Lawrence and even Deshaun Watson, there's just guys that can get you by if Richardson does struggle or get hurt, that you swing for the fences with him because he is that type of difference maker. So yeah, to put him in a breakout category is perfect.
Okay. Dave Richard, got your stupid Miami shirt on there. That's just
not stupid. They were awesome last year.
How bad? Yeah, but I don't want to be reminded about how bad they were this year, so it's annoying.
Well,
but
don't wear a 2024 Miami Hurricanes basketball shirt.
They don't have.
I miss them being in the tournament. Yes.
Let's get a Final Four. You get your Final Four up?
No.
You want me to go first? Okay, I'll go first. I have North Carolina, UConn, Marquette, and Tennessee. I have nothing but 1s and 2s. It's a terrible bracket, but we're all going to have terrible brackets. It happens every year. I'm not going to be the one who's going to pick a ton of upsets because I think that's stupid. You have to get it right. Like, if you're going to pick a bunch of upsets, you better get those ones right because you don't want to pick upsets in the wrong part of the bracket and then miss out on the national champion, whereas the other half of the bracket had the real upset, whatever. So I just went with a lot of chalk. I got UNC over Tennessee. I will say I don't have Houston or Purdue in my Final Four. So that in itself is a bit of an upset. North Carolina beats Tennessee to win the national championship. Not many people giving North Carolina that much of a chance, but
why would anybody give them much of a chance?
Because they're clearly the worst 1 seed. Clearly. So, anyway, that's North Carolina over Tennessee. I'd be curious to see how many UNC brackets we have. We have about We have about 2,500 people in the FFT league. Anybody else got their Final Four up?
Yes.
I got mine. Go ahead, James.
So this is the one I did. I have a father-son bracket that we're doing, and this is the one that my 6-year-old picked with me. So it's he's got UConn and Arizona, and Florida and Tennessee, and Florida beating UConn.
Okay, I feel better about mine now, but that's good. That's good. You know, you never know. That's how you win, right? Dave, what do you got?
Don't forget about what happened last year. How many 1 seeds and 2 seeds made the Final Four? None.
Norlander said Norlander's awesome with this stuff. I can't remember what he said, but there's an incredible streak of a 5 seed or lower making the Final Four. It happens basically every year now.
So I've got 2 seeds that are higher than 5 or worse than 5, I guess, that make my Final Four. This is in the podcast league where number 1, you got to be different. Number 2, I've watched a lot of college basketball the last 2 years. Nobody's any good except for UConn. And I didn't even pick them to make the Final Four because I just want to be totally different. Keep in mind, I'm a football guy. I've got BYU, Nevada, Kentucky, and Creighton in my Final Four.
Fun. And then what? Who's winning?
Kentucky.
Okay.
Taking BYU. BYU has been a team that I've watched enough of to think that they're pretty good. Better than a 6 seed.
I love that Kentucky. You know, you taking that traditional underdog. That's good. You know, what a story it would be if Kentucky won.
Says the guy who picked North Carolina to win the national championship.
Joe, you're not participating, are you?
I am abstaining. College basketball when I was like in high school, I was kind of into, and then I was never into it. And then unfortunately, I worked with the Big East for 2 years of my life. And I have some terrible, awful war stories of some really bad things of people didn't take advantage of, and those kids getting taken advantage of. And I just lost my taste for college basketball. But I'm glad you kids enjoy it. I want you to go have fun with the brackets. Bracket it up, baby.
Thank you. All right, I got a few emails I'd like to read here. We'll go real quick because we're running a little long on time. This is from Doug. Doug wants to be clear. He says Steelers quarterback position will be an open competition, and the quarterback who helps drive Arthur Smith's offensive scheme will start. He's not buying that Russell Wilson is the starter. Anyone agree or disagree strongly with that?
Doug Tomlin writing in. Nice.
I saw a tweet from Mark. I always get his name wrong. Mark Cabali from The Athletic, who covers the Steelers. And he said, unquestioned, that Russell Wilson will be the starter for week 1, if healthy.
I almost think they promised him it as a condition of him signing with them.
Now, I would love to see an open competition and see if Justin Fields can win the job, because clearly he's more fun for us. But sure, I don't think the Steelers are going to go into the season with Justin Fields as the starter.
Unless Russell comes to camp and he just looks as terrible as ever and Fields somehow puts it all together, I would say that the odds are slim that happens.
All right, let's see Joe's pop culture knowledge here. This one is from Dustin Mills. And he says, Dear Jeff, Annie, Britta, Abed, and Shirley. No?
I got nothing on this one.
That is Community. Community.
That was the one that got away from me. I never saw Community.
It's very funny. Very funny.
Here, I got to add to the list.
This is a keeper league. Guys are asking about doing off-season trades. We can keep up to 3 players with a 1-round draft penalty, and we allow draft pick trades. I like the idea of having more year-round fantasy options, but I'm not sure how off-season trades would work in a non-dynasty league. What are your thoughts? Joe, what are your thoughts? Keeper league with 3 keepers. They can do draft day trades, but not off-season trades. Do you think they should just allow for off-season trades?
Oh, you can. I mean, you're taking a risk, though. I mean, the longer out that you make trades, the more possibility if somebody gets hurt while they're training. So I don't know if you want to do that necessarily. I don't know if that's the best scenario for your league. You're taking more risk on. I'm okay with trading any point in time. When you have keepers, they're your keepers. So I'm okay with trading anytime. There's sort of the draft penalty. Like, I don't know if you want to put penalties in there. Leagues are always more fun when there's more activity. So that's the best thing I could say about that.
The only thing I'll add is I don't think it's right for you to trade a player that you don't intend to keep. So let's say I smashed it last year. I had Bijan Robinson, Puka Nacua, and Josh Jacobs on my team. I want to keep all 3 of them. I got them with later picks. But I'm getting a great offer for Josh Allen, who I'm not going to keep. And so I trade Josh Allen away, but I wasn't going to keep him anyway. Then you're getting something for free. And that just doesn't sit right with me. I think if you're going to trade a player, you have to declare him as a keeper first, and then you can move on. Otherwise, I agree completely. Make trades.
But what if you're doing like a 2-for-1 deal and you're getting the best player involved, but the rest of your keepers stink? Like you really want.
Then it sounds like it's a good deal for you.
But you really want Christian McCaffrey, but your rest of your keepers stink. But you have to make some sort of blockbuster trade to make it happen.
Right, but that you've got to trade pull. You've got to declare your keepers and then trade them away. That's the only.
So you're okay with
I'd put in.
As long as the scenario is you're getting McCaffrey and 2 kickers, but you're keeping the 2 kickers.
Well, why do I have to keep 2 kickers?
Because that's the only way you're getting McCaffrey. Is you're trading away your 3 best players to get McCaffrey.
Yeah, but I could still keep 2 other. Oh yeah, I guess I'm only keeping McCaffrey.
You'd have to change your keepers after the trade.
Right.
No, you can if you've already kept 2 players or whatever.
But you're trading.
Right,
you don't get that. You don't get.
I really want McCaffrey, and I'm trading away Bijan, Justin Jefferson, and Breece Hall, and those were my 3 keepers that I declared. I'm a moron. I really want McCaffrey though, and I'm trading away those 3 guys.
Then your only keeper is McCaffrey.
Your only keeper is McCaffrey. Okay.
All right. Figure out the
also,
parameters.
You should play in a league with me. Buy-in is $10,000. I will make sure I have Christian McCaffrey on my team.
All right, Dynasty. This is from Matt M. 1986. Dynasty PPR 1 quarterback league. I traded 1.4 and 1.7 and a 2025 second round pick for Jamar Chase. Giving up 4th pick and 7th pick in round 1 this year, and a second round pick next year for Jamar Chase.
1 QB or Superflex?
1 QB. He also has T. Higgins.
I like it.
So you're getting
Jamar Chase. You're out of round 1.
Yeah, but you're giving up. Who's going to be the consensus 4th receiver?
Well, it could be Brock Bowers. That's probably
could also be one of the quarterbacks. You might get
Bowers or Doomsday.
Even though it's only a single quarterback league, you still might get Caleb Williams to go.
Yeah, I don't know if I love it.
It's a lot to give up for Chase. I'll tell you what. I mean, it's one of those things where you roll the dice if it works out. And Chase, look, 2 years ago, I don't know about you guys, but I had Chase number 1 on my board in terms of wide receiver dynasty guys that I wanted. So looking back on it now, now we're all a little bit concerned because things haven't quite worked out. But there's still a lot of youth on their side. There's still a lot of upside. I mean, the Bengals are theoretically still a big time contender. It's a lot. I would have liked to have maybe get another second round pick. I think the 4 and the 7 was enough. I didn't think you had to throw in the other one, but whatever. If you had to throw the other thing is. But if you gave me I don't know, another second rounder this year or next year or something like that you could build some more draft capital, maybe move up next year to take somebody else in the 25 draft, that would have been better. But I don't think it's bad necessarily. It's just a little bit more of a risk than it was 2 years ago.
All right, Joe, you're such a great host. Why don't you end the show for us?
Well, I want to thank our guests, Adam Azer, Dave Richard, and of course, Jamie Eisenberg for joining us here on CBS Fantasy Football Today podcast. We talked winners, losers. We talked about fantasy football advice, but we also had a little March Madness in there too. Make sure you go to CBS and fill out all your brackets there because it's the best place to do it. And of course, DVR community and a few other things. Azer, where would you like to plug where you are? Because I won't forget to make sure everybody can find you.
I am in the comfort of my own home, and I am going to go shopping in a little bit. I'm going to Targets toay, so I'll tweet from there.
Can I tell you, Adam and I are in a fantasy baseball draft together that we share a team. I've called Adam every day whenever our picks are up, and he is always shopping somewhere. It's the most amazing shopping, clothing shopping, underwear shopping. It's unbelievable.
I can't wait.
You must have paid him pretty good, Jay. I mean, that's what I could imagine.
That's true.
I haven't bought anything. I'm just shopping, They don't pay me enough. I'm spending so much on gas. All right, we got to go.
Adam, hey, we're up. Hold on. I'm in a store. Adam, hey, we're up. Oh, I'm car shopping. Who enjoys this, All right, I'll talk to y'all later. We'll talk to y'all later. Have a great weekend. See you Monday.